you know, our why is that we realize that people are not to blame for the trauma and stress that impacts them, and that trauma actually is caused by unjust systems. And we know that resilience is that inner strength that we all have, regardless of where we come from, and that we are wired for that connection and that healing. And the work that you all are doing, that you will do in the community, is to help create systems and institutions that will support people around the healing and the adversity, by understanding the history reshaping practices, and just beginning those having those deep rooted connections. Feedback from last meeting on April 23rd, things that were positive: the presentation was clear, the connection activities, and the future memory activities. So those were the things that folks enjoyed doing. Things that we're tracking to improve: what days and times are best for convenings, managing time during the convenings, and response rate to reaction surveys. Only 6 people responded. So Seth, that reaction survey is the survey that's lifted up at the end. Is that?
Yeah, just the 5-question, like what do you think? What could be better?
Yeah.
At the end of it.
Yeah, so we want to encourage you all to please complete that survey at the end, so that it can be used for future planning, so that we can have more positive experiences together. So we had our first session with the Historical Trauma, Racism, and Emotional Emancipation by the Prime Collective, Melvin and Misha, last Friday, which was great. And we want to make space for anyone who attended the training to feel free to share any takeaways or reactions in the chat that you would like to share with the whole group. I'm going to stop my share for a minute, or you can come off mic real quick. Anybody want to talk about it?
I was in the training with Mr. Williams, with Corey, and I was just struck by how well the training lifted up, educating all of us about the ways different laws had benefited white people throughout different points in American history, and just found that to be really helpful to like reground on.
This is Carol. I'm kind of at a disadvantage here, but I also was amazed by the historical trauma, I would say, and generational trauma as what they uplift. And as Seth was saying, the educational part for me helps me to understand, have empathy, and to know that we have a work to do, all of us together. Would be great in our community to help our children and the next generation to have a better life.
Yeah. Thanks, Carol. Yeah, it's always important, right, to understand our history, right? Where some of the stuff that we're living in, it started somewhere.
Right.
So having that is really helpful information. Yeah, I think they did a great job. Is there anybody else that wants to share their experience with that session? Okay. Well, we encourage you to attend the sessions. The next one is on Friday, June 4th. Again, they are not required, but are strongly encouraged. We strongly encourage you, if you can make it, to please make it. And they've been the first one was very, very informative. So just want to go over quickly where we have been and where we're headed. So we talk about these as milestones. So the orientation and the onboarding, convening 1, it was a grounding in the context and a casting of the vision. And then defining the priority populations and building on the interview guide. We're here today in convening 3, where we're going to synthesize the learnings from the interviews and prepare to go deeper. Seth, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
No, thanks for framing it all up. Just excited to jump in.
Okay, all right, great. So So up next, we're going to have introductions to our 2021 summer associates. They're going to tell us their name, school, and why they're excited to do work in Edgecombe, Nash, and Wilson counties.
I can go first. Hi, I'm Camilla. I think some of you have met me before. I've been working with ROI for a few months, and I'm working on the evaluation of the Resilient Leaders Initiative. So the surveys you get are for me. I am a master's student at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, studying public health. And I'm excited to continue working with ROI and continue working with Edgecombe, Nash, and Wilson counties, because I'm originally from North Carolina, and I'm really passionate about development and working to address historical injustices in the state.
I can go next. Hey everyone, I'm Graham. I'm currently in school for my MBA at Wharton at UPenn, and also doing a joint degree with international relations degree at Johns Hopkins. And I'm excited to be over the summer. I'm really excited to work in Edgecombe and Eastern North Carolina because although I'm not from North Carolina like Camilla, I went to UNC for undergrad and live right now in Durham with my partner, and just pretty much love North Carolina. So excited to be back.
Cool. Hey, I'm Macy. I'm studying public health at UNC as well, and I'm just excited to work with the ROI team and just get to know people in Edgecombe County. I'm from a more rural area in Georgia, and so yeah, I'm just excited to meet everyone and work for and with you guys.
Hi, I'm Jesse. I'm an undergraduate at Duke studying environmental science. And I was really excited to work with ROI because I'm also from a really rural area in Western North Carolina, and have thought a lot about generational trauma within my hometown. So I'm excited to learn more about, the same sort of dynamics within Edgecombe.
So these different summer associates might be working with different teams at times, just added capacity, and really grateful to get to work together this summer. Thanks, team.
Great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And up next, we have a celebration with Jenny and Pooja. So I'm going to stop my share and turn it over to them.
Awesome. Well, I think I'm kicking us off, right, Jenny?
Yes, and hi everyone, good morning.
Hi everyone, good morning. It's so awesome to see you all again, and it was so exciting to read your notes and see the work that you've done, which brings me to our celebration. So I thought that what we could start with was just kind of reflections from you all on how the research process went. This is maybe celebration / kind of real talk time, but we can, maybe we can start with what you liked about the research process so far, and we can move on to challenges and anything else as well. Yeah, feel free to put it in the chat to just take yourself off mute, either way.
I'll go ahead and go. I think one of the things that I really liked is that having this project gave me a reason, like it gave me a platform to be able to talk to people. In reality, a lot of times I'm actually kind of scared to just be like, hey, I want to get to know you. But it gave me a reason to have these just really amazing conversations with people to find out who they are, what they believe, why they believe what they believe. And I think for me, it just helped me to realize that, if I'm going to be in the position that I'm in and do the things that I do with fidelity and with any sort of effectiveness, I have to genuinely, truly care about what the people that are in my system have to say. I have to listen to them. It's not optional. It's not me coming in and making these decisions. It's getting to know people, loving them, and gaining wisdom from them. So
That's awesome.
This is Carol. I felt the same way. It's good to see other thoughts. I'm grateful for my coach, Chuck, and with you, Pooja, to help us to understand what we were really looking for in the interview. And this is, a start of going deeper. But I was amazed at the different thoughts and the different position one holds in the community. And receiving that information, how can we blend together to help our community? But it was just helpful for me to see what it looks like from the other side of the street or corner of the world. Thank you.
Hey, everybody, I'm going to follow up with that by saying this has really shown me the different lens that you can see where the generational trauma and the historical trauma and what ROI is doing to open our eyes as to seeing. For years, I was looking at it one way, and this is teaching me how to look at it in another way so that I can be more empathetic and realize that what people look like on the outside is not necessarily what's going on the inside, and seeing that it's given us another way to help and to bring about unity in a community and just learning how to work together. And again, I want to thank, my team also, and as well as our leader, our coach, Chuck. He's been great, and Carol and Erica and I have really appreciated his insight on showing us the different aspects of the interviews.
Anything that was surprising or challenging, or that you learned from the interviews in general? I know that it sounds like some assumptions were countered or you learned new things, but yeah, I would love to hear from you on some of those specifics as well.
Well, one of the things that I noticed is it didn't make a difference if you were a stakeholder, as far as a judge or a pastor, or just someone who was just a user, end user, how you want to say. The census was the same thing, that everybody sees the need for change to come about and for people to be able to be helped. And it also shows a willingness of people now realizing that, okay, this is not just going on around. I mean, this is just not in my cycle. It's just everybody, and everybody is realizing, hey, if you're in my life, you're affecting me and we're affecting each other.
Absolutely. Anything else? Any observations or reflections from this first foray into the interviewing and doing that participatory research? If not, no problem. We will move on to Jenny and an activity that I want to make sure everyone has the chance to share. All right, Jen.
I'm sorry. I almost waited till the last minute. No, if it's still okay. Ours has the spate at Wilson County. We're doing research in it's a middle school time, and Miss Budd is the principal, and Miss Holmes is a counselor. I'm EC teacher. So there's a lot going on with trauma right now. And we have been working diligently on several fronts, but at least some of the research is getting information about the things that we're going through right now, and it is painful to hear for especially for some of us, we know those things, but so we talked to several stakeholders when we did the proposal, and we know a lot of what we are working with. But as far as the interviews themselves, we're still working on that, and it's a busy time, and there is a lot of trauma to be dealt with. So we're still excited to conduct the interviews and help people, but you know, it is painful to experience human-centered design and human-centered research at this time too. But we thank you very much for your time.
That's, I think, a really important, point to lift up, is just that it can be really emotionally difficult to do this work as well. So thanks for bringing that up, Stephen. I know Yvette gives us lots of different kind of tools that we can use to support and recharge, but I think that acknowledging that side is so important, especially given what we're working on. I know as I was reading some of the notes and stuff, I certainly felt like this is heavy. Sorry, did someone go off of mute and I cut them off, or shall I hand it over to Jenny to get started on our activity? I will hand it over to Jenny.
Great. While Pooja's just pulling up our slide presentation, I just wanted everybody to maybe take a moment to both stretch it out and then also grab something that you can make some noise with. For me, it's going to be my water glass and a pen, but anything you have that you can make noise, it can be your voice, it can be, I don't know if anybody has bongos, but just grab something to make some noise. We're going to be loud this morning. All right, I'm going to give about 30 seconds. Maybe when you have your object noisemaker, you can help me out by lifting it up so I know you have it. All right, I'm seeing some plastic forks. I'm seeing some hands. I'm seeing a water bottle. I'm seeing, oh man, I'm seeing a phone. I'm seeing a remote. Oh, I love the keys. That's so great. All right, so just to start out this section of celebration, before we get into our activity, I would love everyone to take their lovely microphones off of mute and just take 30 seconds to make as much noise as you can to honor that this is our third convening together and that so much amazing work, insights, and conversations have been shared. So on the count of 3, please make as much noise as possible for yourselves and each other. 1, 2, 3. Woo!
Bow, bow, bow.
All right. Thank you for that. We're going to get into the next slide and actually do a couple just more specific shout outs of celebration. And I'm putting the slide link into the chat right now so everyone has access. But what I would like you to do, and we're going to do these together, is we're going to take about 5 minutes. And on the first slide, I'm asking for you to just name one thing you are proud of doing. And on the second slide, if you don't mind advancing, Pooja, I'm asking that, oh, sorry, if you actually go back 2 slides. To 16. Cool. Okay. Yes. So we're going to start with giving a positive shout out to someone else on your team or in the cohort or in this collective group. And the way we're going to do this is just to write their name and the emotion that they made you feel. I put Miss Yvette because she's made me feel so much joy, the way she's opened this space. And so, yeah, I'm just asking you all to take a moment to do the same, to recognize somebody by name and the emotion that they made you feel. And then once you're done that, if you could just go to the second slide and name something you're proud of. And we'll just take about 5 minutes. Feel free to, if you feel like taking your camera off while you write, I'll give everybody kind of a 30-second heads up. Also, if everyone could participate in this, all the facilitators, all the coaches, everybody, that would be great. All right, everyone, just a heads up, we're going to take about 1 more minute. So get those sticky notes you haven't filled out yet in, and then we're going to take some time to just share out some of these thoughts.
Okay, so I'm behind the times. How do I get double click and make this thing right?
No problem at all. I think if you just select the sticky note and double click, a text cursor should appear. But let me know if you have any problems, and you can put your response in the chat, and I'm happy to also enter it.
When I double click on it, it changes my whole screen.
Do you want to just put your response in the chat, and I'll plug it in for you?
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, y'all, we'll give it about 30 more seconds. All right, and when you're ready, if your camera's off, if you can come back on screen. And I'm going to actually ask that we go into gallery mode for this part so we can see each other's faces. Awesome. Hi, everyone. All right. So first thing I kind of want to share is there's such beautiful just emotions that have been sparked through connecting with each other. And I just want to call a couple of them out randomly and invite people to share more about that person or that experience that they felt. And I'm going to start with somebody wrote Chuck and the word connected. And if you want to come on mute and just share a little bit more.
That's me. That's me, Chandra. And I just learned this morning that Chuck is from my hometown, born and raised. We both are from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that made me smile. I just came from home yesterday, so I'm kind of just got back and kind of missing it. And then he was there this morning to say, hey, me too. So I felt really connected with Chuck this afternoon.
That's great. And Chandra, would you mind picking one of the sticky notes that you want to hear more about? Oh, I believe you're on mute.
Oh, I can't see them. Where are they?
They're in the slideshow. I can do it. It's totally fine. All right, I'm going to go with somebody wrote Vici and Seth empowered.
That would be me. Just the partnership with Seth and Vici and how they have empowered the HOPE program and some things that they've shared and just the resources that they've shared through the relationships of connecting with other agencies in the community that has the same goal to change the lives and impact the lives of those they serve.
Awesome. And then I want to go to Trishanda, wowed and motivated.
That was me. Trishanda is leading the team over at the Reach Center. And every time I talk to her, I'm wowed by the amount of work and dedication and just true passion that she has for their work. And it has motivated me to try to meet that passion. So it's always awesome when you can kind of find somebody to reignite that spark. And
Awesome.
I would love to hear more. Oh, okay, so someone wrote Carol, Kim, and Erica, and Brave.
Yeah, that's me. So that's our team. And the Brave piece of this comes from, like, we're talking about, especially we're working both with the courthouse and their congregation, and to think about the heavy lift of the court system, the judicial system, the justice system, when we're talking about trauma informed. If there's a system that needs to be trauma informed and it's in a system that's incredibly impacted, it's the courthouse system. And that's also a system that's incredibly stuck in its own ways and wants to be oppressive, and that system doesn't necessarily want to change. And so you've got, three warriors kind of taking a step to try to change this huge system. And it takes a lot of bravery and stepping into some of these conversations with judges, district attorneys, other folks. That takes a lot of bravery to even start those conversations. So kudos.
Awesome. And I think we have time for one or two more. So I'm going to call out Stephen and Thoughtful. And I actually wrote that one. I didn't mean to call it out, but I wrote that one because I just really appreciate how Stephen's response is just thoughtfulness in the way he not only asks questions, but just brings up different aspects of the work that I think are really important to name and discuss. And then for a last one, let's go with Crystal and Motivated.
Yeah, that was mine. So I actually, fun fact, ran into Crystal like maybe a week or two ago in town, and had been just like, honestly, we'd just been like reviewing interviews that had been done and stuff, and I was just like blown away by all the ones that the Hope team had done, and just like some of the reflections she shared about like what it has meant, and being like, like if you're gonna serve these people, you gotta love them, we gotta know them, just like really totally diving into the process. And like I listened to that, and it kind of like reminded me of why we do this work. So yeah, thanks.
Awesome. There's just so much greatness in this Zoom room. And it's really wonderful to just take some time and space to celebrate it. We don't have a lot of time left. So I think what I want to do with the highlights you're proud of doing is just lift them up a little bit. And so I'm just going to kind of read them back to you, what we've collectively shared. A few of them. One of them is not giving up when things get hard. That's a really important one. One is being proud that our team met their goal ahead of time, seeing teams jump into uncharted waters, trying something new, giving others the chance to speak about their life and experiences, responding to feedback and adjusting plans in the moment, building rapport with the Hope team, being flexible and problem solving, and being inspired by all of you each month. So again, just, if you want to make a little bit more noise with your noisemakers, I think these are really, any one of these things is worthwhile celebrating, and just the collectiveness of them is incredible. So thank you all so much. Amazing. And before we transition to Paul, I just wanted to give a reminder, if you haven't already, please mail your future memory writing that you did earlier in. You should have received a postmarked envelope from ROI, but if you didn't, just get in touch with one of the organizers, and we'll be sure to make sure you get that. But we're hoping to get all those writings postmarked by Friday, June 4th. So if you have any questions about that, just write them in the chat or reach out, and we'll revisit those future memories later. But thank you all again, and so grateful to celebrate and be with you here today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Pooja and Jenny. That was great. That was a great exercise. Always good to, I think, connect in that way as well, to hear the experiences. And then, I call that loving on each other, what we just did. And that's good stuff. So going to turn it over to Paul. He's going to talk about theory of change right now.
Everybody, good to see y'all. Great job, Jenny. Just awesome to see the energy here. So in the same vein of celebrating what we've accomplished, we wanted to sort of give you kind of almost a mid-process gift. And so I hope you remember, we talked in the very first session about what is a theory of change, why it's important. And it's essentially a document that describes, like what is your organization really trying to accomplish? What are you trying to change, and how do you get there? So I'm going to share my screen because I've got one really quick summary slide just to remind us. Hopefully y'all can check that out. I'll put it in presentation mode. So your theory of change essentially has, it speaks to 6 things about your organization. So you've already seen this, but this is a reminder. It talks about essentially your target or your priority population. I think that's the language we landed on. So who you serve, the problem that they're facing, the inputs that you need to support the people that you serve, the activities that you do to support them, the outcomes, so meaningful changes, in behavior, attitude, status, or condition that you're trying to accomplish, and then your assumptions about how change happens. So we talked about that in our very first session, and then you've probably seen some questions related to this kind of, sprinkled throughout your homework assignments. So what I've actually done is I've gone back and I've read through your applications and your homework assignments and put together, like a 2 or 3 page just theory of change draft for each of the 4 teams that have really kind of been working closely through this. So I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen, and or I'm going to stop sharing these slides. There's a folder, and I can drop the link right here. I will also email this out afterwards. So let me just put this in the chat. But there's a folder, And there are 4 drafts in here, one for Word Tabernacle Church Impact Academy, one for Graders Coming Ministries, one for Spade Middle School, and one for Hope. So each of y'all have a draft theory of change in here. And in drafting that, I really try to copy from your own language. So there's some areas where I've summarized some things, but for the most part, I try to use the language that you've already used. So hopefully it'll look pretty familiar, and none of this is going to be new. So where are you going to see in this? So here's Hope's draft, and you guys did a fantastic job, Corey, Crystal, and team. So just want to reflect that. So went through, and you'll see a quick introduction, like how might you use this? And I will say that each of these things is pretty draft. So, we're summarizing things from the homework, but I'm also maybe taking some guesses about things that we've heard about. So there's absolutely going to be things that you're like, that's not quite right. We should probably change that. And this is your draft to change. So I'm sharing this with you to really kind of give you a good starting point, and hopefully it is a good starting point, but feel free to make tweaks in this. So you'll see a section about your target population, about your problem here. And then what's your intended impact? What outcomes are you working towards? And so you guys have a great statement of, hey, there are these 5, outcomes that we've talked about working towards. And then what activities are getting us there? And you all have listed several things in here. And then inputs, what do we need to make change happen, and assumptions. And through this, I'm putting some comments like, we haven't talked about assumptions in our homework yet, but I've kind of brainstormed some things that came to mind and seem to show up in what you've written in the past. So just go back and make some changes, make some edits to this. But just wanted to share this really as sort of a midway gift to y'all, and hopefully it'll be helpful. I list here at the very top. So what can you do with this thing? Well, if you have a website, maybe we can describe, more clearly what we do on our website. Maybe there's a one-pager for a partner that we already have, or maybe we can develop to sort of communicate to other folks in our community really concretely, what are we trying to do and how do we do it? It's really helpful for funding applications. And I know that everybody here kind of gets your money from different places, so it may or may not be relevant, but if you're going out and trying to get funding or grants, use some of this information and feel free to just copy paste to describe what your organization does. This is really clear and helpful to folks who provide funding. And then ultimately, it's really nice to collect data, and it's really important to collect data and actually, test out, are we actually doing this? How well is this working? And we'll be talking as we continue moving through this cohort about how you go about collecting data to support or understand, your theory of change. But I just find it to be a really nice framework for communicating, the results that you do have. So these are all ways to use it. It's maybe 70%, 80% baked for each team. So go in and use this and start to make changes. I'll share the link afterwards, but just wanted to give this to you all to really sort of celebrate and synthesize all the things that you've been putting together for us for the last several months. So I will stop sharing. Any clarifying questions or comments on any of that before we move on? Okay. Awesome. Yeah, no, you're welcome. I mean, y'all have been doing all of this work. So yeah, take this, take the draft, make it your own. I'm sure when we continue to do, discussions around data, we'll revisit these, but want to share this with you now so you can use it as makes sense. So I think that's all I have, and I'm looking at our agenda. It looks like Vici, you are next.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Just get my screen share rolling. Yeah, so I'm just excited to spend, again, yeah, I mean, I think in reflection, like a lot of work has happened, and just totally blown away by, the folks who've gotten into empathy interviews, just like what you're starting to learn and some of the really deep, hairy stuff that's coming out. And at the same time, acknowledge that this is like not an easy process. And, the act of even setting up interviews, talking to people, getting all this information, kind of making sense of stuff is complicated and also potentially one of the more like critical parts in this whole process. Like if we don't build a solid foundation of understanding, then everything that follows, may or may not be really getting at the root. So I wanted to just spend a little more time on that part of the process here, and just like some of the reflections from the past month and some kind of like strategies or things that we're seeing and how to perhaps go deeper in the coming months. Before I get into that, I just wanted to say or acknowledge, I guess, that like this is the first time we're doing this whole program, right? So we're all kind of learning as we do it in terms of like pacing and what to cover and what makes the most sense. And so, I mean, a reflection I had from this month is that like clearly it's a busy time and like a lot is going on. And so I think not everyone was able to get through all the empathy interviews that we had assigned, which is like totally okay. I mean, we're sort of like trying to slow down here to make sure that we spend the right amount of time here. And at the same time, I did want to just like share the expectation or sort of ask that if you're ever in the process of doing something and it's quite clear that you won't make a deadline, please tell us sooner rather than later, just to like be able to adjust and provide support and plan accordingly. So if anything is ever like, whoa, this seems kind of like not the right next step, or we need more help here or more time here, just like feel free to tell your coaches or to tell us directly. It just helps us better plan for like this type of stuff and how to support. So I appreciate folks that did that already, but just wanted to state it as like we welcome that. So yeah, a couple of things. We had the chance to look at everybody's interviews that were done already, just like tremendous amount of data. And you'll hear a little more from Pooja about how to make sense of that. But also wanted to kind of just like zero in on a couple of common themes and some sort of strategies for how to maybe get a little more data out of those interviews. And then what we're going to do is spend a couple minutes in a breakout practicing some of those in pairs. And so the first thing I wanted to say is that the idea of empathy interviews is not to find solutions. So I think we get pretty excited in the moment to ask the people we're talking to, like, if you were going to solve this problem, what would you do? And oftentimes the people experiencing it don't know. And so the goal is more so to just get inside their head, just understand, just be in their shoes and understand what it's like to be them. And we will identify solutions later. So all I would say is try to resist the impulse to get to solutions right now and just focus on like what it would be like to be inside this person's shoes every day. There's like a famous quote some of you may have heard from where it's like, if Henry Ford were to ask people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Of course, like, and I think this quote may be fake, so if any fact checkers, I'm not sure. But the idea is like, people aren't going to be able to say, I want a car because you've never seen it before. But you can sort of be like, well, what do you mean by a faster horse? What they're saying is like, they want to get places faster. So focus more on sort of like the why behind what they're saying, not necessarily like the answer. And then just a couple of strategies that Pooja had shared in the last session, but I also know that we went through that fast at the end of a Friday, was just like a couple of tips for kind of how to get to that is asking for specific stories, asking follow-up questions to go deeper. And again, rather than asking for solutions, maybe asking for like a bright spot or a good example. And if you can incorporate these into your interview guides more often, chances are you're going to get these like really rich, deeper insights that may be slightly less obvious. And so wanted to just share like a couple of examples of what that looks like. This is also in the template interview guide you had, but just like in terms of question stems you can ask to get stories, it's like, tell me about the last time this happened. So rather than saying like, what do you think about high school? You might say like, when is the last time you were in a high school class? The responses to those things are really different. And so you're trying to think about like specific examples, not overarching stuff. And you can like pre-write these questions in blue here. But what you also want to be doing is just like listening in the moment and following up when they say something interesting. So you might notice like somebody's whole vibe changes, or they say like an interesting word. And I think sometimes we're like so hooked to the guide that we just are like, okay, that's the question, next question. But if they say something super interesting, it is okay and encouraged to like ask more about that. You might be like, oh, you said the word restorative. What did you mean by that? Or like, can you say more about that? Or like, I noticed you started to talk really fast right then. Like, what's happening there? And sometimes that stuff can get some really interesting, like next level insights. So those are just some of the patterns, I think, when we were looking at guides and stuff that we saw, that if you get the chance to go back to do any additional interviews, I would think about building some of these in. And just to share a couple of examples of what this looks like before we practice it. These are actually from real notes that folks did. So I hope that nobody minds me sharing these. This is from the Impact Academies team. And there's one sequence in their interview where they say, like, tell me about a time when you took your child to daycare. So that's like a, pretty basic, like asking for a story at the start. And they get this response. I took Nia to daycare and she stayed in for about a year, but them teachers were something. And so like, one thing you might do here is be like, great, next question. Like something else, but this line, them teachers was something, is like pretty interesting, right? So what they do next is they ask a follow-up question to go deeper. They're like, I noticed you got louder talking about the teachers. What about them made you get loud? And then here's like the actual why. So they're saying like the way they acted, they weren't professional at all, and they never would be upfront when things would happen during the day. So if this question hadn't been asked, you wouldn't get this insight. And then what they do is they ask for a story. So they're like, is there something specific that happened to make you have to ask them about it? And then there's this story here about one time my kid was crying when I picked them up and they would downplay it. I don't trust centers who don't have cameras on the inside. And that's also like super interesting. So sometimes it's just like asking the one question to open the door and then like seeing where the door goes, because a lot of times there's like way more beneath the surface that people aren't thinking about. So I thought this was like a really good example of scaffolding in some of those strategies into like a line of questioning. And then another example I wanted to share was just kind of to think through like how we might do this in another scenario. So this is a question from the courthouse team, also like a really great opening question. And the opening question is like, when we say the term restorative justice, what do you want the community to look like through that lens? And the answer here is pretty interesting. From my point of view, having represented criminal defendants for almost 20 years, I think that as a practical matter, the concept of restorative justice is a wonderful classroom theory, but it doesn't translate well to the real world. So like that's loaded too, right? And I think like one way we might go is be like, okay, cool, next question. But there's like, what is underneath that? Like it doesn't translate well to the real world. Like what makes you say that? And so a couple of examples of like what it could look like in terms of how you might build these in. Like a follow-up question could be like, tell me about a time when you wanted to use a restorative response in someone's case, right? Because like, you don't just come up with this worldview. This is like from some experience. So that's a question you could ask to understand like where they're coming from. But you might say as a way to go deeper, like you mentioned that it doesn't translate well to the real world. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that? To get like details on what they mean. Or instead of saying like, how would you solve that? You could say like, what is an example of a restorative program you've ever seen that worked well? And any of these could get to some really interesting, deeper insights. So like the big takeaway here is it's mostly that like, I mean, across the board, I think for the interviews that we saw, people are doing like a really nice job of creating a safe space where people are saying some pretty real things. And then I think there are additional opportunities now that y'all have like created that space to try to go a little deeper on like what they actually mean and where that's coming from. And so these are just some of the strategies or examples of how you might do that I wanted to like call out and share. And so the kind of overarching takeaway is like, you sort of want to like build this stuff into your interview as much as possible. It can just be like repeated. You could just repeat this process 4 times and have an interview. I mean, you could repeat it 2 times and have an interview where you like ask an intro question, follow it up with a story, follow it up with a question to go deeper, and then ask for a bright spot. And like that kind of formula can get, I think, like to those deeper levels of like what's going on. So we're going to take a second to practice this, but before that, I just wanted to see if anyone had any like questions, comments, reactions to that set of information. I cannot see the chat, so if there is stuff in the chat, let me know.
Seeing comments about staying curious. And people are very impressed with the interviewing teams have done and level of observations people are getting to.
Cool. Sweet. So I think what we wanted to do is just, it can all feel very awkward sometimes if you're like high stakes in the moment, trying to remember all this stuff with people that you don't know. So wanted to create a little space of just like low stakes to practice it with your peers. And so what we're going to do is spend about 20 minutes in a pair breakout. So you will be in a room with one other person from this cohort. And you guys are going to take turns, one person being the interviewer, one person being the interviewee. And we'll provide the starting questions to ask. And so it's just interviewer, take about 8 minutes to follow that guide and interview your partner. And just what I want you to be thinking about is where you maybe can like go deeper. So like if they say something interesting, can you follow up with like, oh, that's really interesting. What did you mean by that? Practice that kind of thing. Or if they say something and you could follow up with a specific story, you kind of practice inserting that. And then I'll kind of ask you guys to keep your own time. Once you get to about 8 minutes, if the person who was interviewed can just share a little feedback of like how that felt to them or, you know, anything they noticed, then you can swap. And then we'll come back. And so the questions are, it's not high stakes. So we're just going to use an example here where like, let's say we're interviewing the other person and we're trying to understand how to improve online meetings. Because what I'm sure is true for everybody on here, it must be. So we're in like a bazillion online meetings and they could be way better. So when you're being interviewed, just answer honestly as yourself. But the questions that we've provided that you can ask are like one sort of, opening, like, what'd you do for fun last weekend? That just like creates space. And then some of the questions are like, when was the last time you were in an online meeting? What part of it was most engaging or frustrating? What's the best online experience you've been a part of? You can use these questions, or if one of the answers kind of lends itself to digging deeper, think about what some of these like follow-ups could look like. So yeah, we're gonna hop in soon to do that. Before that, are there any, and I think Seth just put the questions in the chat, but before we do that, are there any questions about the activity? It should be really fun, so don't be stressed too much. I'm just gonna make sure these breakouts are set roughly. Cool, so we're gonna hop into them and come back at 2:35, 2:36. All good? Teleport time? Sweet, okay, I'm gonna do this.
They said somebody's coming. They're just gonna take a little while. So don't forget.
Cool, I think we're close to back. So welcome back, everyone. Sweet, hopefully that was fun. One of the reasons we did that was just following this convening, you will have additional time to go back and interview new folks, or if you want to follow up with folks you already talked to, that's always okay to, ask a couple of questions, go deeper. So just, yeah, it's an ongoing process, definitely not over. But would love to hear if anyone had any reflections from that experience, like how it went, anything interesting or surprising that happened, any questions?
I was with Steven and I thought he did an amazing job. So I had follow-up questions. So it was a good example for me.
I feel like I'm a little behind, but I was with Mr. Tevin Borkin, and he did an exceptional job and showed me what to do. And I really enjoyed our conversation. So thanks for the opportunity.
I was with Corey, and I'm not sure if any of you ever had a conversation with Corey, but he's pretty dope. And I think that one of the cool things that he did in our interview was to create an environment where we just kind of talked first about just life stuff and make connections before jumping into the questions. And then even in the midst of the questions, still continue some of those conversations. So it was pretty dope.
I talked to Mr. Tremaine, and he showed me that when I started, and then we did the second one where he did it, we switched places, and he did the same thing that you were kind of talking about, Kyle, where it was more of a conversation. And that really showed me, like, as I approach, how much easier it will be when it's a conversation, more organic. So I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, just love the collective wisdom in the group and like everyone's opportunity to learn from each other. So that's awesome. Cool. Yeah, just wanted to hit on that. And I think Yvette, maybe I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah. Great. I just want to, just one thing I heard that it is powerful. We know it's powerful because we experience here, but that connection, right? Making that connection with people and then getting to that next piece of what you're doing goes such a long, long way. And people, I think, are genuinely happy to connect as well, so that's a good thing. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Pooja, the beautiful and the bold, and I was trying to think of a third B. I don't know, somebody help me out here. But I'm going to turn it over to Pooja. She's going to talk about the synthesis of the information.
Awesome. So you all have done this incredible work, and this is kind of a preview of your homework. So I promise this is just a taster, and we are going to do a ton more together. But the next step is to take all of this information that you have collected and to come up with sort of concise statements about what you learned. And in human-centered design, we call those insights. And they're like slightly, there's a bit of structure to them. So the template that we like to use is starting by saying kind of who we met. Usually that's either a person or a group of people. The other is, it surprised us to see or hear that. And this can be either like a single something someone said, and you're like, wow, that was interesting. But more likely than not, it's kind of a group of quotes, like a theme that you saw, and that was kind of a surprising trend that came out. Or it might even surprise you to hear that like there's someone said something and someone else said something completely different, and it was the opposite. And that was something that was surprising. So it's really kind of taking a look at all of what you've learned, all of the things you heard from users collectively, and thinking about what was surprising, what was powerful, what was striking about something they said. Often when you were doing your interviews, we gave you during the notes the sort of instruction to think about right after interview, what were 3 kind of takeaways for you? That's a great place to find those things that surprised you or that were powerful or that were striking or interesting that you learned. But that's not all, that's not the learning, right? So the next stage is really applying your analysis as a team. And that's why it's really, really helpful to actually do this step as a full team and not in your kind of individual interview groups. And so it's around kind of, we wonder what this means. And what you try to do is kind of use your analysis to figure out the why, the how, and the why it matters. So I think the best way to kind of explain, to show this to you, is to show you an example. And this is actually from another ROI project. that was focused on trauma-informed discipline in schools. But basically what we heard was from providers, or rather we met providers and students, and that included admin, it included teachers, it also included students. And what it was surprising to hear for this particular group was that although individual teachers had the knowledge and training to recognize that misbehavior is a symptom of trauma and a lack of social emotional skills, they didn't always have the ways to respond to that with that understanding. Both personally, kind of like instinctually, they wanted to respond in a way that maybe they knew better than to do. And then also institutionally. So even if they did have that personal understanding, they didn't have the scope in their organization or in their classroom to deal with it the way they wanted to. And then we pulled the kind of quotes from those interviews that showed that that collection of quotes was what led to that kind of, this is what surprised us. And then applying their kind of analysis in this last section was around kind of like, why does that matter? And one of the things they said was like, that training doesn't cut it. You know, this idea that we're always sending teachers to trainings, we're always telling them about trauma-informed stuff, and that like that knowledge aspect just isn't enough. And that's why it matters. And then the why was like, there aren't enough structures necessary, or sorry, there aren't the structures that are necessary for teachers to both kind of make that a habit for them personally, and that they are able to really shift that mindset. And they don't have that kind of institutional space necessary to kind of change their disciplinary decision. And so that was really going into the why is this thing happening? Like, we're seeing that they're not responding the way we want them to. Why? How is it not happening? Is that those discipline decisions aren't happening, and that they personally, instinctually aren't responding the way they want to. And then like the why does that matter to what we are doing? Because they're in a school and they were figuring out kind of what programs they need to be putting in place. They were like, that training actually isn't enough. And so I think that really shows kind of the process of what you'll be going through, is kind of taking a look at all of this research that you've done, noticing what are those things that are really standing out to you as a team, and then applying your analysis to understand like, what's the why of why that's happening? What's the how of how is that happening? And then why does it matter to you and your organization in your context? Like, it's almost kind of like the opposite of what can you do about it? It's like, what does this imply for you? And Vichy, I will hand it over to you to take it into like kind of how that translates to the homework.
Cool. So,
but maybe actually, do you want to do some questions first? I apologize. I always do this. Are there questions from the group on that stage? I will note that it seems pretty intimidating, and it is something that you'll be doing as a group, and you'll be doing it with us, with guidance as a group. So I promise we're not leaving you to your own devices on it.
Cool. So yeah, clean transition. I will also, I'll just echo that writing insights is like one of those like tedious, kind of difficult processes. And yeah, we're going to try and provide as much support around it too. So if it feels like, how could you come up with that real quick? Like, we'll continue to work through it. I find it to be also like one of the more challenging processes. And so, yeah, just a little foreshadowing of what the homework will be. Hopefully that's sharing the right thing, is one of the first things we'll ask you, and the document, this is in the document, there's a video of me explaining this as usual. But one of the first things we're asking is for y'all to actually schedule a check-in with your team and coach using a doodle link that has times when like ROI staff is also available, so that we can hop in with you. And so that before you dive into the homework, we'll have just like more people on there to kind of help disentangle stuff. Even if you haven't done a ton of interviews yet, please still do this step, because then we can hop in to help you with that part of the process as well, just to kind of like get things kickstarted. So that the link to do that is in the homework. It's just a doodle poll. And then we're just asking y'all to create the calendar invite and invite us to it for that. And what will happen in that meeting is if you haven't completed all your interviews yet, we might have some discussion about that. That would be the first step to do before you dive into this, either way. But then we'll spend some time together drafting insights. And there's a template here that it just is the same thing Pooja just shared. That's kind of like what you'll be filling out. And then out of that, we'll ask you to think about like, okay, what new questions do you still want to learn more about? And what are the ways to do that? And we'll, in the second half of today or the remaining hour of today, you'll get a chance to learn some other data collection options besides interviewing that you could use here. And then the final step before the next convening in July is to just refine and update any insights. So we want to come to July with like at least 3 just like solid insights that summarize kind of what you learned. Might be a little iteration. Like, oh, we did some interviews, we drafted a thing, we need to like get some more data, draft another one, update some stuff. And so it's okay if it feels messy and like you're circling back. But by the end, it's like come with a couple of these, and that'll be the foundation for them starting to think about like, what do we do about it or solutions. The final thing I just wanted to say is for the teams that submitted interview notes by whatever deadline was stated, Pooja actually went through and read everything and created some themes for you in a really cool board, online like sticky note board. So that's pasted into your homework if it's been done already. And there's like links for you to be able to view that board and zoom around and stuff. So that might be a good thing to read before you dive into insights, because it'll give you a sense of like at least the themes that she pulled out. And if anybody didn't already do their interviews or didn't already submit their notes, but you do later and would like help doing this, we can figure that out in that first check-in. So yeah, I think that's roughly it. Any questions on that? Cool, should be fun.
Pooja, are you done right now?
I am done as of now. Just a couple things to note is that if you've done your interviews already, likely myself, Vichy, and Seth will go through and like might make some comments about where we suggest you might go a little bit deeper. So if you have the option of speaking to the person again, or setting up other interviews to find answers to those questions, we would be like that would be really, really exciting. And of course, encourage you to do the same after the exercise this morning.
Okay, great. Thank you. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to take a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, so it's 2:50, we'll come back at 3. We will go into a practice on a resilience tool. So I ask that you come back with something to drink. And then we'll move forward with the rest of the afternoon. So be back at 3 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Yvette.
You're welcome.
Hey, everybody. So just a quick frame for our final activity here today. Coming back to this visual of an iceberg that we first saw with Bailey in meeting number 1. And just want to take a moment to pause and acknowledge you've kind of heard the theme throughout, but the work that we all individually are attacking and collectively are attacking is complex. I mean, trauma, racism, different forms of oppression, and things connected to trauma and resilience have been constructed over many generations. And so when whatever acute challenge we might be seeing really just might be the tip of the iceberg. And it might just be what we're currently experiencing, what we're currently seeing, but there might be a whole bunch more underneath the surface, like in this visual, that is at play, that is a root cause that is leading to some of the outcomes we're seeing. And so just in these beginning sessions of the Resilient Leaders Initiative, we're going slow and we're learning these different tools to better understand our users and to better frame the challenges we're trying to solve, because we're really trying to make that space to get under the surface and see what's beneath there. And so what we've done to date is really this getting to some obvious insights. We're starting to make sense of the iceberg we're seeing above the surface. And in this next 6-week period, leaving today until our next convening in July, we don't have a convening in June, we're going to be working to try to get to non-obvious insights to better understand what's beneath the surface for our program or for the people we serve. And so just wanted to share a quick story of kind of in ROI's beginnings, how we dealt with this iceberg and experience some of these obvious versus non-obvious insights. So 2017, similar to you all, we did empathy interviews with different providers and people in the East Tarboro community. And what came out of that were a couple different, what we'd call obvious insights. One was that what we often label as a problem, different forms of addiction, different forms of coping, aggression, violence, might actually be a personal solution to unaddressed childhood trauma or to unaddressed stress. Another insight is that parents in trauma are severely isolated and have few to no trusting, safe, close relationships. And a quote was that kids don't feel loved and parents also feel a severe lack of love. And the last obvious insight was this idea of a cycle, that often the parents who are most affected by trauma and mental health challenges are the most likely to end up having children who potentially repeat this cycle. And so these were some of the insights we came to after the first round of interviews. Now, I don't know if y'all are feeling like this, but when we got here, Vici and I felt like we were right in the middle of this squiggly diagram. I see you, Miss Bud. We felt totally, and so if you feel this, that is normal and that is good and that is positive and that means you're on the right track. And if you stick with us and stick with your coaches, we promise there is a method to the madness, and you will continue to make more and more sense as we go through this process and get to a clearer and clearer path. And so the remaining time today, we're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to learn different tools to help us find more non-obvious insights. Some tools to dig deeper. We can use data tools. We can use systems thinking tools. We can build a journey map, and we can continue to go deeper on empathy interviews. And the first session that Vici led, if there's someone you talk to where you're like, wait, I want to go back and ask them some questions, some follow-ups I have, that's super encouraged. Like, do that. People will love that you cared enough to think of them and think of what they said and to come back and have more questions for them. But these are some of the tools we're going to dig deeper into. And so for us, we used some of the systems thinking tools that Bailey provided, and worked with different members in Tarboro to build a systems map, and got to two really non-obvious insights, to kind of things beneath the surface. The first one was this idea that we are overly punitive and that we are often punishing coping behaviors and removing kids or adults from the exact environments or healthy relationships that can provide support or healing. And so we wouldn't have really gotten to that without digging deeper. And then the second one is that in the healthcare system, healthcare isn't necessarily punitive, but we're just giving the wrong type of treatment. So people are coming into a doctor's office or the emergency room complaining of chest pain or stomach issues, and they might leave with a heart attack steroid medication. But what's actually going on underneath the surface is anxiety and stress related to trauma. And so just the non-obvious kind of getting under the surface here was that in healthcare, we're applying the wrong fit of treatment. And so those really have kind of informed this whole strategy that we're all a part of as a community that was built by the community in Edgecombe around learning, healing, and connecting. And so just this next 6 weeks is an important 6 weeks where you're going to get more support from your coaches, more support from facilitators to try to get under the surface and get to some of these non-obvious insights underneath the iceberg. And thanks to Bailey for bringing this up in our first convening. And really, I mean, these are tools you can use in the Resilient Leaders Program, but they're also just tools for your leadership in general, because your job every day, I mean, you're seeing multiple icebergs and trying to figure out what is under the surface here. And if you solve this iceberg this week, there's likely going to be another iceberg next week or next year. And so this is just more tools in the toolbox for the program you're in right now, but also just long-term for your own leadership. And just a visual that helps motivate me. We're really like digging for the gold here. We're digging for the insights, and you never know when you're one dig away. So like, keep going. Like, you might feel in that messy middle right now, and lean on us, lean on your coaches, lean on each other, and let's keep going to get to these like non-obvious insights. So up next, we're gonna split into breakouts, and would encourage people to, if you're on a team, split up, like go to different breakouts so that everyone on the team can get different perspectives and get different tools to share with your entire team. And to facilitators who are leading these, if you don't mind hitting record, we can save them. So if anyone wants to go back and learn from a breakout they weren't in. And then for the breakouts themselves, these are kind of the questions. If these questions resonate for you, join that breakout. So if you want to go deeper with data, how can you use third-party data and research to find non-obvious insights? You'll want to be in Paul's group. If you are interested in digging into systems thinking tools and talking about how can we strengthen or grow this positive thing, or how can we mitigate or reduce this challenging thing, you'll want to go into Bailey's breakout group. If you have more clarity about who your priority population is, you might want to go deeper and build a journey map with Pooja, and especially thinking about the HOPE program or the Impact Academy might really benefit from a journey map with Pooja. And then finally, if you want to go deeper on some of the empathy interviews and what we've talked about in the beginning of the session, advice, question and answer, practice around interviews, come to an empathy interview office hour with me. Any questions from the group about these 4 breakouts?
Oh, that's interesting. I think it just pulled people out. Fascinating. So anyway, if there aren't, I think you should be able to select into the breakout you want. And if you don't see it, there's like on the bottom of Zoom, there should be those like 4 squares that says breakout rooms. And if you don't see that at all, you can tell me and I can send you to whichever one you want. And for coaches and stuff, I would encourage you to also join one that you feel maybe might support your team, or if you feel like you can add value to the people in there.
Appreciate just people sticking with it. I know these meetings can be long, and so hopefully we're adding some value and just excited to see what these next 6 weeks bring. Would love to make space for closing reflections coming out of these breakouts. Any learnings or reflections that anyone would like to share from their breakout?
I really enjoyed the systems maps, so I think it's definitely something that I want to look into. As far as just even going back to individual interviews that I did and just gleaning more information and figuring out, like, if I decide to go back and do interviews, where those knowledge gaps are, I think it'll be helpful.
Thanks for sharing. Cool. And then closing, just a reminder on my end is that these tools are meant to help us get below the surface. So with your coach, we're going to plug in and give some explicit support after this convening and do individual meetings with teams. The goal is just to hunt for these non-obvious insights, to spend time engaging with different tools to get to some non-obvious insights. This is all kind of wrapping up this empathy phase of the work. And it's really going to put us in a position going into phase 2, starting in July, to get in, really roll up our sleeves and get into the what solutions are we testing, what solutions are we piloting, and getting into that nitty gritty. And the quality of what we do in the second half is going to be a lot higher because of the effort you all are putting in now. So just appreciate what everyone's been doing. And I'll pass it over to you, Vici.
Thanks. Yeah, just wanted to wrap up with some what's next kind of announcements. So yeah, the things to take before the next convening, and just as a kind of like FYI, the next convening isn't until July. It's July 7th. And so it's like a little longer between now and then than usual. And part of that reason is because we want y'all to like take a break. So in your scheduling and stuff, like take into account if you want to take like 1 to 2 weeks off and your team just like doesn't do work on this. Or if you have like family vacations or anything, like encourage people to unplug. Aside from that, yeah, I think like first couple of things are to use the doodle that's in the homework, and we'll email out the links to the homework documents, but they're also in the same overall folder that the other previous homework documents have been in, and they're linked in this slide deck as well. But there's a doodle there to schedule a meeting to start to draft insights. And then following that, you'll kind of think through, okay, what are some places we want to dig deeper? What are the tools from today you want to use for that, whether it's more interviews or something else? And then update those insights for the next convening. The other thing to expect is that Camilla will be emailing everyone in June, probably that first or second week of June, with a link to a mid-program survey, very similar to the one you did before the program started. And again, she's sort of like an independent party that's collecting that data and then synthesizing it for us. So we won't see like your individual answers, but are super interested in your feedback and reflections there. And we hope for 100%. So if you end up not filling it out, she will probably follow up a lot of times. So just look out for that. And then this is the information for the next convening in July. What's on the calendar, we'll share an email as well. And then a couple of other like announcements or things to look out for. Misha and Melvin will be continuing their series of historical trauma presentations. So the next one, it's a bunch of Fridays in a row, same time always. So the next one is June 4th, and then there's one on the 11th and the 25th. So we strongly encourage you, and someone on your team can go to them, even if everyone can't, to be able to build that stuff into your, even the way that you're thinking about the insights and how you're approaching the systems work. These different things can be informed by having a lens that is attuned to historical trauma. So I definitely encourage some of your team going to that. And then Crystal, did you want to say anything about this event that's coming up also in Tarboro?
Yeah, sure. So this is on June 10th, as you see, at the McIntyre Auditorium at ECC. So CUEQ North Carolina, that's Community Unity Equity North Carolina, is just putting on just a conversation basically to talk about equity and opportunity in Edgecombe County, basically in 6 specific areas: education, business, religion, sports, arts, and agriculture. So they're all people, everybody is going to be from Edgecombe County, just from these different sectors. And so it's going to be an hour and a half. I think it's going to be a great event with a follow-up at TBC in Tarboro. So would love to see you guys there if you're able.
Will we be able to get information so that we can participate in this if we want to?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to think of how I can do that. I guess, can I throw my email in the chat maybe and just have people, I guess, email me, and I can definitely get you that information for sure.
Yeah, whatever this information on this slide, we'll send it up and send it in the follow-up email too, if you want.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, that would be super helpful.
Kind of like date and link to get tickets. And then, yeah, just wanted to, we have one more closing thing after this, but wanted to just make like 2 minutes for people to, if you feel like it, do the session feedback right now, so that we have your thoughts on how it could be better. So I think Seth just dropped that in the chat. Y'all can just click on it and take like a minute or two. Cool. Super appreciate people's honest suggestions, things that went well, because obviously we check them after and want to make adjustments. And so, yeah, last thing before we hop off, it's just if anybody, I mean, again, I am incredibly grateful every time we gather with just like people's, the thought and the intention behind the responses you share, engagement, sort of curiosity, reading through the interview notes of like what people are uncovering, it all just like totally blows me away. And so very grateful to all of you for being on this journey with us. Would love to open it up for if anyone else wants to unmute or share in the chat any gratitude or shout outs before we go.
Thank you all for your thoughts about me when my sister had passed and I wasn't in our last meeting. But as it would be at the repast for her services, I was talking with a family friend, and his name is Michael Jordan. And he told me to tell Seth and Vici hi. And I saw you all were in my thoughts even at that time. So thanks, you all.
Love Michael Jordan. That's awesome.
Oh, I would say Paul too, as far as the Paul and Mr. Santos Silva, but Paul, especially with the data, it can be mind-boggling, but it's very useful. I tend to be a data person most of the time. I'm a spiritual person too, and occasionally those things make you focus on two different areas. So that perspective is useful when I become when I need more macro level data and less. I don't know how I could need less spiritual data, but I think it was very helpful what he did. So I'm appreciative to that. It helps balance us.
Cool. Well, yeah, if all hearts and minds are clear, we don't need to hang on any longer, but appreciate seeing y'all. And yeah, can't wait to continue working together in the coming weeks.